just somewhere that if it ends up being, you can isolate it.
Yeah. All right, we're live.
All right.
Let me tweet out. We're not doing these like this isn't Saturday Night Live. We can be a little loose with things here. To anyone joining, let me check. Oh yeah, we got people rolling in. Welcome. We're just getting started. Just gonna do my social tweeting here.
Do your social tweeting, Ryan.
Is that what it's called?
Hello, everybody. Oh, look, I got spam.
In the chat?
No, I know it's shocking, but I got spam email.
Oh.
Oh, this is great, Ryan. This is great. So I got the full screen thing going on here.
Yeah.
And I set it up so that I can just switch between this and YouTube. So I can go back and forth between the comments and stuff.
Very nice.
Yeah, this is looking good. People can't see it yet, but anyone who's watching, if you're listening, see if you can see a difference in my video. No, I don't mean that I look uglier than normal. I just mean see if you can see a difference in terms of I made a couple of changes to, I'm using a teleprompter now.
Mm-hmm.
So I can make direct
you're a little
icon.
bit lower than me too on the screen now.
You want me to be higher? Well, I'm not going to screw with it now.
I'll screw with mine.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the headspace should be a little bit higher.
Yeah. Oh, that's the wrong button. Hang on. Whee! There we go.
There you go.
I just did my chair.
Yeah.
That's easier.
But basically, the bottom line about the teleprompter, and I'm just nerding out about it because we're just getting started, but my camera is actually going through a one-way mirror, and I'm looking at Ryan and the stuff that I'm presenting through the teleprompter. So I can be looking at whatever's going on, whether it's Ryan or code or whatever we're sharing, and my eye contact is going to be right at the camera, which is really neat. At least I think it's neat.
I think it's great. All right. So I just tweeted, hello, everyone. Those of you that joined, we're just kind of bantering here as we go. All right. Just pull up my notes, then we'll get started.
Wait, you have notes?
Yeah, I prepare for this.
Oh, that hurts, Ryan.
At least one of us needs to.
That hurts. I'm the one who. Oh my god. Okay.
I think my shirt causes a little bit of artifact.
It's called the moire pattern.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Should I take it off? Okay.
No, please. Dear God. Just whatever you do, leave the shirt on.
Last thing everyone needs to see is my skinny runner's body. All right.
Well, what I'm worried about is you're going to blind everybody.
That too. I live in Texas, though. The sun's always shining here. I'm not in upstate New York or something.
The sheer whiteness of it all, man. It just feels like a flash of light.
All right. Let's get started.
Let's do it.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to CraftQuest On Call. This is number 19. We've been doing this for 19 episodes. I think, Andrew, we started so right now, as we record this, it's mid-March 2021. When did we start CraftQuest On Call? Like where I was counting episodes, probably last summer, something like that. I'm trying to think.
You're definitely asking the wrong person.
52. So 52. So about twice a month we've done it. So it's been a little bit less than a year, probably. We took a little bit of time off too, I think, some breaks and stuff. But anyway, welcome to the live stream. So on this one, we got some good stuff. We have a new featured segment that I'll talk about in a second with a special guest who may or may not be currently lounging on a oversized beanbag chair behind Andrew. So we're going to talk about Tailwind JIT or JIT. I don't even know what the proper pronunciation is. I believe I heard Adam pronounce it as JIT.
It's
anyway,
a JIT.
All right.
Well,
so,
in the interest of just butchering everything, let's call it a JIT.
A JIT. How about a yeet? A yeet. It's a silent,
or you could,
it's a silent J.
Or you could do it like a Spanish pronunciation. It could be a hit.
Hit.
Right.
Tail.
The J is like an H sound.
Tailwind. Yeet.
Tail heat.
Yeet.
Tailwind CSS heat.
Heat. Heat. The CSS heat. We're going to bring the CSS heat today with JIT. Andrew's we're going to do a quick demo, talk about JIT, what it is. It just was announced earlier this week for Tailwind. So we'll talk about that. Andrew, I wanted to touch a little bit on the revamp that you've been doing on that site. So you did a series of live streams. So we'll talk about that. We have a question from SAS to JIT consideration. Somebody wrote in. And we have a question about local hosting on Windows. So I'll throw that over to Andrew since he's done a lot on that side of things.
Oh, dear God.
And then also we have a question about assets in S3, public and private, and how to control that. So there's an interesting question that's from friend of the show, Andrea. So we'll talk about that as well. And in addition to some other questions that I've pulled up from the community on Stack Exchange. And then, I also wanted to talk about, totally missed my bullet here, moving from legacy CSS to Tailwind. And this is something that I been working on, and I know you've done as well on a project that we worked together on.
And I did it on that modernizing project too.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. So we can talk about that because I think that's, if people have older sites that maybe use like Bootstrap or another framework and they want to use Tailwind, what does it look like to bring Tailwind in a way that doesn't require a complete rewrite? So those are the topics for today. Let's start with, and then we have our special segment called Tyler's Tip. And
Tyler's Tips. Yep.
Tyler's Tips. So Tyler is your son, and he's gonna. There he is, back there in the glowing blue.
That's him back there.
He is.
You can see him. That is Tyler. He will be on in a little bit.
Yep.
To do Tyler's Tips, and this is not just so everyone knows. Tyler, you can stand here. It's okay. This is not one of those cringy, I'm a helicopter parent, I want to get my kid on camera or whatever. This is actually like a legit, he's been talking about this for a long time. He watches all of these streams and he knows stuff that I don't know and have never heard of. And he's actually going to show a legit real tip. This is not a cheesy, chintzy, kind of dealio. Right?
I got a preview. So we'll have Tyler on shortly, and he'll give the tip.
When we need you, we'll call you up, okay? It'll be soon. All right. So get ready. All right.
Go back to your resting place. There you go.
So, Ryan, this would be a good time to let everyone know if they are watching this at some other point in time. Maybe they're watching this on delay. Maybe they're watching it live. Who knows? If they wanted to submit a question to CraftQuest so that we can answer it and do something with it, how would they do that, Ryan?
Well, that's a great question, Andrew. So what they can do is they can go to craftquest.io/on-call. And there is a beautifully formatted form courtesy of Airtable that they can put in their name, their question, and a couple other bits of information like whether you want to remain anonymous. Submit that. That gets dropped into a spreadsheet, which then I review before every live stream, and then we will answer your question on the air if we can.
Perfect.
All right. Whoops. Sorry about that. Wrong button.
Whoa! I have hair in that one though.
Yeah, I need to have a little overlay for you, or for both of us with hair.
Well, yeah. There you go.
All right. So let's talk about Tailwind just in time. So Andrew, what is this, and what are the so this was announced on Monday, and they're calling it the next generation of Tailwind CSS. So just-in-time compiler for Tailwind. So this is like a concept now applied to Tailwind. Like, so we probably should zoom out a little bit and just explain what just-in-time compiling means anyway.
Yeah, so just-in-time is a generic term. It's not like they invented it. And in fact, if you're using a Mac of any kind, you probably have a just-in-time compiler in there. If you're using one of the fancy new modern M1 compilers, all it means is that it will do the compilation. So let's say you launch a application on your fancy new M1 Apple Silicon Mac, and it's written for the old Intel, right? So what it will actually do is it will dynamically recompile that thing into the kind of ARM code that is needed for the Apple Silicon, right? So that's all a just-in-time compiler is something that happens just in time, right? And in fact, they did the same thing with Rosetta originally when they transitioned from the PowerPC to the Intel Macs. They did the exact same thing. There's a just-in-time compiler that when you ran it, it would recompile on the fly from PowerPC to Intel, and then your Intel machine would be able to run emulated in Rosetta. And this is a very similar idea with Tailwind CSS. What they're doing is they have a compiler, and what it will do is it will generate the CSS just in time or on demand as needed. And I think it might be useful to take a step back and talk about why some of this might be necessary. So
yeah, it's a good idea. Do you have a four-legged
I got a
creature?
dog down here. Yeah, I got a dog down here. Oh no, she's about to unplug the microphone. No, come on.
No.
All right. Anyway, sorry, we interrupted by a dog. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay.
So what the paradigm that Tailwind CSS used to use is you have a Tailwind config file, and you can tell it, what variants to create or whatever, but then it generates this massive amount of CSS, right? So it will just generate every possible variation, every possible variant that you would ever need. It will generate that ahead of time. And then for production builds, we would set up this thing called purging, where it would then go through and it would say, okay, out of this massive glob of CSS, we're going to get rid of everything that wasn't actually used, okay? And there are some advantages in the way that this was done, in that all of the CSS is there ahead of time. The disadvantage is it was getting to the point where lots of things in the tool chain that was trying to digest the CSS was choking on it. Because you're ending up, you could, with all the variants and stuff, you could end up with like 12 megabytes of CSS. And things like hot module reloading in Webpack would be slow. Rebuilding in anything would be slow. Even some of the dev tools like Firefox and Chrome dev tools would crawl to a slow, just be brutal for them. They would crawl to a stop when you're just dumping so much CSS. And it kind of makes sense because you're handing 12 megs of CSS that the browser has to parse through, has to make a CSS object model tree out of, and do all that kind of fun stuff. So it makes sense that at some point you're going to reach the breaking point where you're just generating so much CSS that the ecosystem and the tool chain that you're using just kind of chokes on it, right? So that was the paradigm with Tailwind, was generate this massive CSS, use that massive CSS in development, and then in production, we would run purge on it to get rid of everything that we don't use.
Right.
Now, the JIT stuff, any questions on that, or should I transition to what we're doing?
That makes total sense.
Okay. So now what we're doing with this JIT thing is we're doing the exact opposite, like literally the exact opposite. So what the purge CSS would do is it would go through all of your template files, all of your, JavaScript component files, whatever, and it would look for any CSS classes that were being used in there. And it would whitelist those classes or include list or whatever the right terminology is these days. It would bring all of those CSS classes in, right? And it get rid of everything that wasn't used. The way the JIT works is it kind of does the opposite. It's not part of production build. It's just a part of the way it works, whether it's in development or production. And what it does is it uses the same settings that were in your purge settings, and it goes through all of those and it looks for classes that are used, and then it generates the CSS for those classes that are used on demand. And that's the just-in-time part. Does that make sense? So before we were generating everything and then chiseling it down by looking at what classes we actually used in our templates. And now with the JIT, we're going through our templates to see what classes are used and on the fly generating just that CSS. That's what we're doing now. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. And I'll put a link along with the live stream, and I can drop it in the chat as well. But there's he shows a demo where it's generating that CSS file as he's adding class names to the markup and stuff like that, and it's adding just the generating just the classes and stuff that he needs.
Yep. The thing I really like about the way that this was implemented is because it is in some ways very similar to the Purge CSS, you don't have to change much of anything to start trying this out and taking advantage of it, because you already were passing in the templates and such that you were using before to do the purging, and now you just pass in the same thing to the JIT.
Do you want to run through this?
Yeah.
You want to show this? I think I still have this up and running. Is that okay, or should I have shut it down?
Oh my God. Well, let's see if it works. So this is it should work. So go ahead and go to localhost. So this is the devmode.fm website that Ryan just pulled down and he got up and running in his local environment. And it's super easy to do. We'll have the link in the show notes. If you want to clone this down and get it up and running in Docker and see all this stuff, you can demo it before you even try it yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's go to our the build chain directory.
So, all right, let me just make this a little bit bigger for everyone.
Yep. And what I think I would like to look at first, real quick, is just hit Command 1. Yeah. In the build chain directory, you can close up the. Okay. Close up go to the Tailwind config, which is in the build chain directory. Yeah, it's just below that. Yeah. Okay, so in this purge setting, we're passing in the content and we're saying, okay, all of our content is in the templates directory. And then we also have content that is in our view components directory.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have some content, and this is because I'm using this view component called view table. We also have some content in there. So this is telling Purge CSS where to look for all the stuff that we are using, right? To make sure this is all the stuff that will have classes. So it knows what it can include and what it can strip out. And this is the exact same stuff that the JIT is going to use to go through and find all the classes that we need. So let's talk about why we would want to use the JIT to begin with. So we mentioned the speed and the fact that the developer tools and stuff were going to be choking on this. That's really the reason. And we're going to show you a demo of the difference in the performance of this stuff, both before and after. So you ready to do it, Ryan?
Let's do it.
All right. So the first thing I want to do is let's go to our Webpack config directory. This is my Webpack 5 config that I still haven't written the article on. Go to the post CSS loader. All right, and you can see here it's using the Tailwind JIT. What I want you to do is copy this whole line and paste it in again. And this is just on a new line though. And get rid of the JIT after the end of it. Yep, and get rid of the @ sign, and then get rid of the JIT there too. Just the JIT. Just rename it. Yep. And then scroll down. You can search on JIT or whatever. You can, or just scroll down. There it is. And then just get rid of it there too. So all we're doing is we're saying this is a traditional Tailwind setup where we're just using Tailwind the normal way, no JIT. This is how we're going to be using it with the purge and all that kind of fun stuff. And let's take a look at what this looks like. So if you hit save, my Webpack config will dynamically reload the Webpack stuff. So if you go to the, it should tell you that it's restarting it, and there it goes.
Yep.
It did it. Yep, so it's good to go. So what I want you to do is go to the components in the go to source CSS components, and then find the global CSS. You may have it open somewhere. Components, yep. And we're just going to do that standard silly thing where we add, asterisk, mustache, border, 3-pick solid, whatever color Ryan feels like reflects his mood today. What? Blue? Oh, you're blue today. No? You're deep sky blue. Okay,
That's the
fantastic.
closest to Carolina blue, I think, as you can get by default. All right.
Fair enough.
That's a little bright. Anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and Andrea asked a question in chat. So, is this Tailwind 2 only? I don't know. I don't think it matters, actually. I think you could use a JIT with anything. But here, what you see where, okay, so this is telling you it recompiled it in 1.79 milliseconds. I want you to go back and just change that color to something else again, like change it and show people the browser so people can see like what it's doing to the, yeah. There we go. So there's our lovely blue color. So go ahead and change that to some other color that you're feeling, like maybe the second thing that you're feeling today, Ryan. We're gonna do a little therapy through CSS colors. So what are we today?
Let's see. I was just gonna bring up. Don't need that.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So another color. We're gonna go with.
How are you feeling, Ryan?
We're gonna go with.
Let it all out. Let it all out.
Maybe. Oh, let's go with Rebecca Purple because I like Eric Meyer, and this is after his. There we go.
All right. So if you go back to you'll see it recompiling. So that did it in 2. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. So no, it's good. People can see the purple, and you can see that it did the recompiling in about 2.3 seconds, right? Or 2,318 milliseconds. Okay, so this is not horrible, but if you're doing side-by-side development, it actually is kind of annoying to wait a couple of seconds. And this is a very small CSS project, really. Like there's not, on dev mode, there's not a ton of custom CSS or any kind of craziness going on there. So this is a very, very simple case. But even that, if you're pausing 2 or 3 seconds between reloads, like it really can slow down your workflow in terms of what you're doing. So now let's take a look at what this looks like using the JIT. So let's go back to our code.
All right. So we want to go back here and use JIT
to the Webpack config. Yep. And this is what I like about it is just switching between it is, I mean, if you just want to try it out, it's very little you have to change. So just, undo, undo, undo. There you go. So instead of including the regular Tailwind thing that you normally would require in here, you just require the Tailwind CSS JIT. So it's at Tailwind CSS /JIT. And that's it. I mean, that's literally all that you have to do. You hit save. And then if you go back to the split view, if you're able to do that.
Yep. Oops, sorry.
All right. It's okay.
Please hold. I'm not good at computers. I don't.
It's there somewhere. I know it's there somewhere.
I don't do. The problem is everything is like 9 times the normal size on my screen.
I know.
Hang on. Here we are. All right.
Okay. But you need the CSS in the right window, though.
But it also it recompiled.
Okay, so look at that though. Look at the time there. So what I want, go to the CSS though, because I want to show them we're going to do a live, changing of that thing.
Yeah.
So remember, we were at 2,300 and something milliseconds. So now change it to a third color that you're feeling, Ryan. Like what are you feeling like on the inside? You're dark orange.
Orange.
Right? Sure enough. Look at that. Look at that.
So
we're talking like,
Yeah, I was gonna say it's about a little bit less than 10 times like faster. Like takes a tenth of the amount of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 10 times faster. And I switched over the devmode.fm website to use this, and this is actually being used. I use it in development now, and it's also live in production. I'm using it, and there are a couple of caveats, and it's technically still experimental. Yeah. I have the feeling that this is the direction that Tailwind is moving because, to some extent, there is a diminishing return, or there's a point where you're going to be generating so much CSS that your whole development workflow and the tools that you use are going to be choking on it. So I have the feeling that all of Tailwind is probably going to be moving to this way.
You see the question on the screen? Yeah.
Yep.
But
Danny's saying autocomplete still works. So that's a question I can't answer. And the reason I can't answer is it depends on your editor and it depends on how you have things set up. In PHP Storm, everything still works as expected. Like it all just works. Why? I don't know, but it does.
Okay.
But there also is an official Tailwind CSS plugin for VS Code, and there is a Tailwind CSS plugin for PHP Storm as well. I would imagine that if there are any deficiencies in this, that they will get ironed out. So try it out and let us know. I mean, you saw how easy it is to switch over to it. If the rebuilding of CSS is something that is slowing down your workflow, I think it's definitely worth trying it out.
Absolutely. All right. Speaking of Tailwind, we have a question and about Tailwind and JIT or JIT, just in time compiling. Let's see. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen.
All right. So coming from the classical Sass side, this is a question from Mr. Mike, where I have many separate SCSS files. If I started to use Tailwind JIT, would I need to go with standard CSS for the hopefully few custom classes that I have to use, like in one single app.css, or could I compile down my Sass stuff and hook that up with post CSS?
Yeah, 100%, Mr. Mike. You can keep your Sass stuff however you want it, and you can use it all in post CSS. So actually, go back to the code that we're looking at, that Webpack config, the post CSS config.
Yep.
So post CSS is something that can emulate. It can do everything that SCSS and Sass can do. So if you go ahead and open up the in build chain, I want to tell you about a tip, but I don't. No, it's in the Webpack.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yep. In the Webpack configs, not settings, and then post CSS config, and then make this the. So scroll down a little bit, and you can see where I'm loading some post CSS plugins.
Mm-hmm.
So post CSS import is a plugin that gives you @import, which you might be used to. And then mix-ins allows you to do the mix-ins like you do with the ampersand with Sass. And nested is the nested rules where you can put those in there. All these, you basically install the post CSS plugins. Like you can pick and choose the pieces that you want, and you can end up with something that works exactly like it. Because lots of people are coming from a Sass background, and post CSS can do all the things. Yeah. Anything that you were doing in Sass or SCSS, 100% you can do in here. You don't have to have them all in one file. You can have them in separate component files. You can import them. You can use whatever syntax you want. And post CSS allows you to kind of pick and choose the things that you want to use. The idea behind post CSS is that you can be using CSS features before they're released, as they're being debated in committees and all that kind of good stuff. And in addition to that, you can use other useful features like Sass and SCSS have, but you can just pull in the bits and pieces that are useful to you and use them. And it's a really neat, powerful tool. It's kind of like Babel, but for CSS in some ways.
Excellent. Let's continue on the Tailwind thread, and then we'll veer off and get your input on some local hosting stuff.
I'm going back and forth, Ryan, between over here, I got a coffee.
Yeah.
And over here, I got a protein shake. I don't know what that says.
Well, since we're doing this in the midday now, you're not drinking. What were you drinking? Not schnapps.
I'm drinking that lovely bottle of liquor that you sent me. What is it called? What was the bottle of liquor you sent me called again, Ryan? The one that you sent? What was the name of it?
So I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. I actually did buy a bottle of cognac specifically for drinking.
It was something that old people drink. Schnapps, cognac, all the same.
Wow, that hurts. Yeah. That hurts.
All right. So Andrew, you and I had been talking. Go ahead.
Hold on. I'm sorry, Ryan. Yeah. I'm sorry, Ryan. I just want to answer a question in chat. So Real Human Being is saying, too bad it requires post CSS 8. Vue 2 is incompatible. I don't think so. Because I am using, on the devmode.fm website, I'm using Vue 2. And I'm doing that because I never upgraded some of the components, or I haven't yet upgraded some of the components, I should say, to Vue 2. And it all works. So I don't think it's an issue. you might have to update the one of the loaders, like maybe the post CSS loader or perhaps the view loader. But you 100% can use Vue 2 with Tailwind 2 and the JIT. Like, I mean, I'm doing it. So if you want to see all the things that you need, just go to github.com/nystudio107/dev mode, go in the build chain directory and look at the package.json, and you can see the various things that I'm using there. But no, you 100% can use the JIT and post CSS 8 with Vue 2. Like it'll work.
All right. Good deal. Thanks for addressing that. And thanks.
Didn't mean to cut you off. Just wanted to make sure that
no.
I, you know.
We want to get the answer or questions answered by the real human beings. Everyone else is just the bot in the chat that we programmed to respond to us to make it seem like that people watch.
Yeah.
Okay, so Andrew, for a while, you and I, or let's say it's probably been me, and complaining and you complaining to me why I didn't do something. But I wanted to switch CraftQuest over to start using Tailwind. And we had this whole idea, and this kind of will segue into one of your most recent live streaming projects. But we had this whole idea of like, you call this old site where we're going to go through an older site and revamp it. And you wanted to use CraftQuest as that. And I wanted to do things.
Bob Vila forever, man.
Hey, I like some Bob. So I wanted to do that, but I wanted to do it in much smaller pieces. I would say that I am technologically more conservative than you are when it comes to ripping apart projects. So you'll get it's so creepy the way that you stare straight into the camera now.
Are you that so locked down that you don't understand like real human contact? You can't hold. This everyone who's watching, this is just me establishing dominance over Ryan. You see who breaks first? It's Ryan. It's broken first.
Yeah. So anyway, I wanted to add Tailwind in, and I wanted to slowly start to revamp some of the pieces of the site in Tailwind, and especially build new things. I had a landing page that I wanted to do for CraftQuest for the new teams. And I didn't want to build this like a new page using the old system. And the CraftQuest is kind of built on a Bootstrap-based theme, so I didn't want to do that. So I really wanted to get it up and running. So we had worked on a project before together, that Outbreak database. I think we've talked about it before, where you kind of just brought in Tailwind and then kind of dropped in the legacy CSS, so everything would work, but then we could optimize where we wanted to with Tailwind. So that was the idea here with CraftQuest. So like something like this whole page is, it uses Tailwind, but lots of the rest of the site does not yet. Although some things do, like there's pieces on the homepage that use it. If you go into like the lessons, like these cards, people that are attentive will notice that they all have radius corners now and things. These are all have been revamped with Tailwind. But I wanted to do it selectively and as I had time, rather than just have to rebuild the whole site, since like my work primarily is creating the training for people, not just rebuilding the site over and over again. Although this, I guess you could argue, is part of what I do. So anyway, so let's talk about like what we did, because you kind of gave your input on how this should work. So the first thing is that I created a brand new CSS file that is the main CSS file for the site. And we imported Tailwind. We imported the two legacy CSS files that we had to use. Already like compiled CSS, right? Just we didn't, because I'm basically not going to be changing those.
Yeah, because that's one of the biggest things. Like even if you, let's say you're using Tailwind on all your new sites, going back and redoing an old site that was done in Bootstrap or whatever in Tailwind just sounds incredibly unappealing. Like I can't think of like, it just sounds like a real pain to have to go back and redo the whole thing. So this is a way that you're able to take the CSS from the old site and non-destructively add in Tailwind. because you can see what we're doing here is we're including the Tailwind base, and then we're adding in the legacy CSS next, which is then because of CSS specificity, because it comes in afterwards, it's going to overwrite anything that's in base. And then we have the Tailwind components and utilities that will then override our legacy CSS. So this is going to put it all in one big CSS ball, like a big hairball that your cat spits out, And but the nice thing is that then the Tailwind utilities and components that you write will override any of the legacy CSS that you have in terms of specificity. So this is wonderful. This lets us use the site will instantly work with the old CSS we had, but then we can slowly refactor and modernize it using the Tailwind stuff.
And I had a few like small issues, like major layout issues were not a problem. There were a few small issues, one with like an SVG. They were gigantic, they weren't sized properly, and I just had to go in and address those, but nothing major. And then in the layout where I pull in the CSS, then basically just replaced it with just the main CSS file, and launched that up, and tested, made some small fixes, and then just started to kind of play with different parts of the site that I wanted to switch over. So if we look at, one thing I did is I did use a Tailwind prefix. So I did use the TW. I just used TW. There were some class name collisions that I was having, and so I wanted to be, when I was writing the code, I wanted to be explicit about that I was writing, this was Tailwind, so I didn't have any problems. And then I can go back and, as I change things, I just go back and remove the old like bootstrapped classes and just redo everything. So that actually worked out really well. That's been up on the site for a couple weeks with Tailwind running, and haven't had any problems. Been able to make some like small enhancements as I change things. And it's been nice because now I know that when I'm getting ready to redo the dashboard that customers see when they log in, and it's pretty terrible right now. And so I'm going to go in and I'm going to go in and just do it all in Tailwind. And it's the level of risk there, technology-wise, of deploying this, because I always weigh everything I do in terms of risk, because this is a subscription site. I have customers. I can't blow things up. Like I have to deploy, and I have to be able to. I don't want huge projects that take months, because it actually increases the risk of the deployment. So I try to have things in small, discrete packages, and then I can deploy them that way. But now, like, I'm excited because now I can go in and just actually do all this work on the new dashboard in Tailwind, and don't have to worry about any of the legacy CSS stuff that was driving me crazy. And it kind of frees you up to think a little bit more forward. So it wasn't that difficult. I think it was a bigger deal in my head than it actually ended up being. So if anyone is interested in doing that with an older site, maybe that you dread updating because it's using, whatever, even if it's like your own hand-rolled CSS setup, you want to migrate it over to Tailwind, it wasn't that bad at all. You can just drop Tailwind in and just slot it in. Yeah,
and this is the exact technique that I outlined, and we'll link it to in the show notes here, but in the Outbreak database article, postmortem, that I wrote up, is the exact technique I use there. It's the same technique that I used in that video series that Ryan mentioned about renovating the craft site, and it's being used here. And it's nothing fancy or anything like that, but the idea is keep all your old legacy CSS, and then just bring Tailwind in. And the wonderful thing is you're not going to add anything in terms of size, because now you're running everything through Purge anyway, and it's going to end up it's going to add CSS only for the Tailwind classes you're actually using. So don't worry about that. And in fact, it probably made your CSS smaller than it was before, Ryan, because you weren't doing any kind of purging. So you were getting a lot of the old classes from the framework library you were using that are now purged. So I bet your CSS, even though you added Tailwind to it, I bet your CSS is smaller, isn't it?
I haven't checked. I assume so. But if it's not, then I'll let you know in the next live stream that you're wrong. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. if it's not, then something is wrong, because
Right.
you're essentially, we're using a whole framework before, and now you're using that same framework, but you're purging stuff that, because every CSS framework, you're going to have classes you don't use somehow, you know?
Yeah.
The other nice thing is, Ryan, if you wanted to, you could switch over to JIT in what you're doing, and the same technique is 100% just going to work. You can use what we showed before, switch over to using the JIT, and it's just going to work.
Right. Yep. All right, let's do another question. You ready?
All right. Ready as I'll ever be.
Here it is. It's from Ben. He says, I have tried and failed to set up several Craft local development environments on my Windows machine. I wonder if you would address the simplest, most reliable, and stable approach for Windows. Everything I've tried requires way too much fiddling or seemingly becomes obsolete very quickly. So I'll preface this by saying that neither Andrew or I are Windows users. However, I see this more as like here's the two specific things you should use because those are going to be great forever. But I would say that maybe we can talk more like strategy than specifics here.
So I have opinions on it.
Okay. Why don't you start?
There are certainly bespoke tools that you can use. I think that if you're looking for something, I mean, it sounds like he wants stable, reliable, and the too much fiddling. I don't know if I can help you. We're talking about modern development here. I think you're going to have some fiddling, and then things going obsolete, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am biased, but I would say that Docker is your answer, because here's why. Docker, they have a vested interest in making sure that this works absolutely everywhere. That's literally what it is. And I think it's going to be a technology that's going to be around for a lot longer than, Joe Bob's local hosting app that, some people are using. The other thing is, you don't have to use Docker directly. If you want to, great. Like, I encourage people to learn it. I think it's a good skill set to have, but you don't have to learn it. You could use Nitro, and Nitro is going to be relying on Docker. And you can tell, if you have an issue with it, you can report it to Brad or Jason and have them fix it. Also, there are a number of front-end tools that use Docker as well. There's DDev.
Yep. Sean just mentioned in the chat DDev, and Ben is here as Versa Studio.
There's DDev, there's Lando, there's DDev, there's Lando. Like the number of front ends to Docker that are out there is very large.
Yeah.
But
so I would recommend, Ben, going to those bigger community supported tools versus, and this is nothing against Andrew's amazing work, but versus like the hand rolled stuff, because I feel like that's hard. It takes more. If you don't want to have to put in the effort to maintain something, then hand that off to someone else, whether that's DDev or Nitro 2. I've been using Nitro 2 a lot, not on Windows. And I know that I think originally the beta didn't have any Windows support. It does now. I have read about some people having trouble with it, but is it the WDSL? I forget what the name of the
WSL. WSL2.
Yep.
So here's the thing though, Ryan, about this. So if there are any issues with WSL2 and the Docker layer, like that's going to get worked out, because there are millions of people that are using Docker and are relying on this stuff,
Right.
And then because Nitro layers on top of that, like, okay, maybe they'll have to tweak this or tweak that or whatever. But I think the path to getting it right is going to be a lot quicker. And Ryan, you're right. Like, if you don't want to learn Docker, you don't want to learn how it works under a hood, that's totally fine, man. Millions and millions of people get in their car every day and don't know how a carburetor works. You don't have to know.
Yep. Exactly.
There are lots of these front ends that are built on it. DDev, Lando, Laradoc, Sail. I mean, they're just freaking everywhere. Nitro, whatever. Use one of those that leverages it. But Docker is this underlying framework that I think a lot of things are going to be based on going forward, because the containerized approach just has so many advantages.
Yeah, and Sean, I know Sean is one of the developers I know that works on Windows. So he said WSL2 is a pita, and I don't think he's referring to the type of bread here. So
yeah, I don't think that's bread.
I do like a good pita, but that's not what he's referring to. So try out Nerdy Deed says Homestead. Try out Nitro 2. I would definitely try out Nitro 2 if you're doing like mostly or only craft work, then Nitro 2 is nice. DDev, I know for a fact, Ben, if you reach out to Sean on Discord, I bet he would help you too if you run into issues.
Yeah.
So check that out. So Andrew, I think it's time for our new featured segment of the live stream. What do you think?
Tyler, you're on, sir.
All
right.
Snapped.
Get them all geared up.
Yep.
All right, so Mr. Tyler. There you go.
So this
All right,
is
I'm gonna-
Tyler.
Mhm.
And
Let me
Tyler
get him all
has,
set up.
Yep, Tyler, I'll go ahead and introduce while you're doing that. Tyler has our new segment called Tyler's Tips. And he has a good one. He showed it
Hi.
to me. Hi, Tyler. How are you?
I'll show you how to turn on tab search.
Tab search. So
Right.
is this in Chrome?
You ready for it, Ryan?
Yeah, we're ready.
All right.
All right. All right, Tyler, go ahead and I'm going to bring up the screen here. Go ahead and tell me what I need to do.
Go to Chrome //flags.
Chrome://flags. Okay.
Yep,
I
in
have
your
it-
address bar, Chrome
Yep.
//flags. Yeah.
Okay.
And then write tab search.
Tab.
So what we're doing here is we're looking through some experimental features that are in here, which you can
okay.
turn on or off via a flag. All right. Tell
So
them what-
so these are feature flags. All right. Okay, so what do I do here? It says the default
Press enable
enabled.
and
All
press relaunch.
Okay, then I have to relaunch Chrome. Okay.
And wait for it to reopen.
Yep.
And if you have any windows and stuff,
Yeah.
if you click on the black
the black circle in the upper right. You need to have
right
some
here.
tabs open though, Ryan.
I have tabs.
Oh.
Let me close this.
Look at that.
Well, so now I can search through, and this is across all my windows too, I think.
It is.
So if I can go to
So
craft.
if you are one of those people that have a billion tabs open, you can enable this experimental feature and you get to search through your tabs.
Look at that. And it brings me right to the tab. Now I wonder, is there a keyboard command? Oh yeah. Shift Command A. Did you know that, Tyler?
Yeah.
Shift Command. Look at this. This is so cool. And I can go to CraftQuest. Oh, I don't have it open. Oh yeah, there it is.
It works on every platform: Linux, Windows, Mac, Chrome OS, and Android.
He's
Wow.
right. It even works on Android. It might even work on iOS, does it? No iOS?
No, not iOS. All right. So there's our Tyler tip for the live stream today, everyone, is in Chrome, go to the flags.
There are some comments for you there, Tyler.
Flags. All
This
right, we
is
got-
gold, Tyler. This is awesome. Thanks, Tyler. See? Pretty good.
Yeah.
All right.
look at
I'm going to kick
this.
him off before he takes my job, Ryan. Say goodbye, Tyler.
See you, Tyler. Thank you. All right. Tyler's
Come
tips.
here.
That's cool. I didn't actually know about that
here.
before he showed it to
That was
me.
really well done.
Yeah. Thank you,
Great job.
Tyler.
He, like I was saying, this is not one of those cheesy get your kids on camera kind of things. He watches these YouTube videos and he's telling me stuff about upcoming beta operating systems. I don't even know what's going on. And so he's showing me this stuff and I was like, okay, if you do your homework and if Ryan agrees to it, this is a legit tip. Like this is actually a really useful
Yeah.
tip. At least I think it is, you know.
Well, he might replace you one day, Andrew. One day you just might not get the link to the live stream from me, and it just might be sent right to Tyler.
I'm
And then,
kind of okay with that.
Sorry. All right, let's do another question.
Let's do it.
This is from Andrea. She says, I have a multi-site install of Craft with a public and a private site that share the same set of assets, but only a subset of them are available on the public site. I'd like to move all the assets to S3, then via CloudFront. However, I want to ensure that only logged in users can see the assets available on the private site. And so I think what Andrew is running into here in a follow-up was that she noticed that everything's like there's no access control when she's adding the assets into Craft through like a S3 volume. And so she could get all the URLs at like as public URLs, all the assets at public URLs through CloudFront. And so she's wondering if she can control them by site. Like, can she have, the assets that are only available to the private site be private unless they're logged in and there's no public URL. So there's a lot going on here. Do you follow? But it sounds like to me she would have to authenticate against AWS for each request, right?
So, I mean, I think I might need to know a little bit more.
Okay.
I want to make sure it's what she's trying to do is prevent there from being a public URL for these things, but people can view them in the back end. Is that right?
Via the private site, so it's still public, from what I understand. And Andrew, you can chime in.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If she really needs to prevent people from being, because even if you okay, so my first reaction was, all right, let's put them in a separate put them in a separate S3 bucket. So the private ones are over here and the public ones are over there, because I thought she cared about whether certain users were able to see them, right? But apparently it's even more than that. It's that she doesn't want the public URL to work. If you want that to happen, if you think about it, something has to be sitting between CloudFront and the person requesting the images, right?
Right.
And the way that I can think of to do that would be a Lambda function.
Yeah.
So if you have a Lambda function that sat there and it asked your Craft site, is this person logged in? And if they are, it would return the image. And if they're not, then it wouldn't. That would be my first way that you could possibly do it.
It's funny that you mentioned Lambda, because I've actually, on my previous site, Majingo.com, for the downloads, they actually are in a protected volume, like a protected S3 bucket. But then there is a Python script that actually, if they have access, it generates an authenticated, like a tokenized URL, whatever they call it. I don't remember what they call it in S3. That actually then gives access to that protected item, but it does it via the AWS API, the S3 API. But I think if you want because even if somebody's logged into your site and they see, and you want to give them access to an asset, that's still a public URL in a sense, unless you programmatically give them just-in-time access to it via some sort of authentication. Now she says that she's using local volume at the moment, and that would be easier to secure, right? No, I guess it wouldn't be.
Okay, so I mean, ultimately, if the goal is, and let me see if she's saying anything in chat, logged in users only. So if the goal is to kind of have a vault, a way that you have to be logged in to view this thing, whatever this is, if you think about it, something has to sit between the request and the delivery of the request, right? So even if it was a local asset, it's not going to help, because if the asset is requested directly, it's just going to be directly returned. The Nginx or whatever is running is just going to return it. So you need to have something.
You can obscure the link to it, but it's still going to be publicly available.
Yeah, it's still publicly available, and anything that is publicly available in one way or another, expect that is going to leak into the public. So then it's a matter of how important is it? How much does it matter that people can't see this thing or whatever? So what I would recommend is, if it's super important, like if it's some kind of a content needs to be locked down or whatever, if you have the assets locally, you could use something like a PHP script that would check whether they're logged in, and if so, it would manually return the file. So any request for the file would run through PHP on the back end. In the same manner, it could be a Lambda function that is sitting out there, running JavaScript that would, It would do an AJAX request to see if this person can access this thing. If so, then return it. You could also potentially use an edge worker if you're using Cloudflare, like that's another thing. But the real point is you need a piece of code between the request and the delivery of the request that does some kind of a authentication in terms of can they have this thing, and then either returns it or returns an invalid response. But you're going to need some kind of code sitting somewhere between this asset and the delivery of the asset.
So Andrew, yeah, like you're probably going to need custom code. And so what I always do is, and I just did a video about this in my craft module course. It's the last video, which I encourage people to, when they're trying to solve a problem, is to find other examples of a similar problem being solved, and just to sort of as a wayfinding tool. So here's like a Craft S3 secure downloads plugin. I've never heard of this plugin. I just found it in the plugin store. But
so you're endorsing it fully?
No, I'm not endorsing it. But it's more of like, well, okay, they're doing downloads, but they're Jonathan Melville is the original developer of this.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Hi, Jonathan.
So this returns a pre-signed URL. So it's basically doing what I did over on my other site, which is it was a pre-signed URL that gave someone that timed out after 30 minutes or something like that. Okay. And maybe that's one way. Now this is for downloads. Like you just want to request it and probably render it in the browser, I assume.
I would think the same technique would work though.
Yeah.
Because that is another way you can do it, right? It can be a pre-signed URL, and then again, there still is some code sitting between us and them because the signing of it is what is causing it to either work or not work on the S3 bucket end.
Right. Yep. So that's, I think what Andrew said is there has to be something in between. Otherwise, because you can't have a protected bucket on S3 and then selectively give access without authenticating, because S3 is not going to give you access to those objects in the bucket. Otherwise, it could be an opportunity if you don't want to use this to write some Python too.
Sounds thrilling.
If you want. Cool. All right. Let's see. Let me see what else we got going on here, Andrew. I'm just looking for my checklist here. Oh, that was everything on the list. Can you believe it? If anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the chat now. I'm going to scroll back through. Thank you to whoever gave us the thumbs up. What are we supposed to say? Smash that like button. Hit the ring.
Smash that like button. Ring the bell.
Ring the bell. Subscribe.
You're supposed to. If you were a pro, Ryan, you'd be able to point.
Yes.
You'd be able to point to the place on the screen where it was. Yeah. But
right.
do you know? Or are you just pointing at every corner?
Yeah.
You're just pointing at every corner, Ryan.
I would also probably have like some like groove and vlog music or something like that too. Instead, we'll just have something like this. Sorry to everybody's ears. Oh, we got another thumbs up.
I hate you.
Ben Croker has, sorry everybody, that was really loud. Has a question for the experts if there's time.
Oh, that's really hilarious. Ben Croker.
He's referring
Ben
to.
Croker asking the experts. Why don't you just get on here and answer it yourself, Ben?
Okay, here we go. So Ben says, when it comes to MySQL or oh, we got another thumbs up. Every time we do thumbs up,
Ryan is so excited by the thumbs up.
I won't do the DJ air horn if we get more thumbs up. So it's going to be the reverse. Okay. So he says, when it comes to MySQL versus Postgres, the rule seems to be that MySQL is for small, medium data sets, whereas Postgres is recommended for very large data sets. Are there any good arguments for using one over the other? The first thing that always comes to mind is what Brad Bell once said, which is you should use Postgres because MySQL is just terrible or something like that. I don't know, Andrew, do you have any insight to that? I've worked on both. I've always found Postgres like just harder to interact with, just like as a developer. But that's really been my only experience. How about you?
Well, I want to prefix this with I have I've got lots of experience doing lots of stuff. Database stuff is something that I would not say I'm an expert on. I kind of fumble my way through a lot of this stuff. Um, I know enough about it, but I don't pretend to be an expert on database queries and all that stuff. However, from all the reading that I've done and everything that I've seen, yeah, I mean, pretty much what Brad said. Like MySQL is just kind of crap, and you also have that schism between MySQL from Oracle, which is now at 8, which is kind of diverging somewhat from MariaDB. And from from the point of view of a standards-based database environment, Postgres seems to be one of the best. I think one of the reasons why it may be difficult for people is you're just not used to it. It uses a different permission system in terms of how it's going to work for user access. And it also just, some things are, subtly different. The other main thing is that there isn't as much tooling. Like there's tons of tooling around MySQL for everything under the sun. And there are some very good Postgres tools as well, but there aren't as many really nice, Postgres clients and all that kind of stuff. I haven't done enough exhausted performance timing of Postgres versus MySQL to tell you where there's a performance gain or at what point or what data set size it makes sense to use one or the other. I think I'm going to be honest here. You're going to get a better answer by Googling the results, because people that know that know far more about it than I have done performance tests on this stuff, and they'll be able to tell you exactly what it is. The dev mode site is using Postgres. I've used Postgres on it since Craft 3 was released. Never had a single problem with using Postgres with it. The only issue is the tooling. So if you have like your favorite database client that you use, if it doesn't support Postgres, then maybe you're not going to use Postgres, But it is my understanding that large data sets is something that it excels at. I can't tell you beyond that, honestly, Ben,
All right, that's probably would be my answer as well. And if anybody is looking for a new tool locally, I've been enjoying Table Plus, and it works with all sorts of MySQL, Postgres, SQLite, everything you can think of, it'll work with. So if you're looking to something that's a little bit more flexible than maybe what you've used before, check that out. All right.
Very
cool. I keep hitting the wrong button. There we go.
I'm just going to get Tyler up here for the sign off.
Yeah. All right, Andrew and Tyler. Tyler, thanks for the Tyler tips this week. Appreciate it. And everyone, thanks for joining us. Check out all the new stuff that we've been posting on CraftQuest, including, Andrew, the live stream series that you've been doing on revamping an older Craft 3 site with your new development tools. And I think you launched that, so that's up and running now.
Yep.
Some rabbit ears. And that's up on CraftQuest too. It's free, available to everyone. You don't even have to log in. Check that out. Thanks for joining us. craftquest.io/on-call if you want to submit a question for the next live stream. Until then, we will see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. You say goodbye, Tyler?
Bye.